Nobody in that dusty saloon realized the withered stranger nursing his whiskey was the man who'd killed 43 outlaws before most of them were born. He sat hunched in the corner, gray beard reaching his chest, weathered hands trembling slightly as he raised his glass. The younger men at the bar, members of Victor Kane's gang, saw only what they wanted to see, a relic, a ghost from a dead era, someone to mock. But in the fading light of that Arizona afternoon, they were about to learn that some legends never die. They just wait. The town of Copper Ridge had been dying for 5 years. What started as a peaceful mining settlement had become Victor Kane's personal kingdom, a fortress of fear where the law meant nothing and resistance meant a bullet or a noose. The sheriff's office was a burned-out shell. The last mayor hung from a tree on the edge of town as a warning. Anyone who spoke against Kane's rule disappeared into the desert, their bones picked clean by vultures. The old man, though nobody knew his name yet, had ridden in 3 days ago on a black horse that looked as ancient and worn as its rider. He'd taken a room at the boarding house, paid in silver coins that looked like they came from another century, and said maybe 10 words total. Mrs. Harrison, the widow who ran the boarding house, had felt something cold in her spine when she looked into his eyes. They were the color of winter storms, and just as merciless. Now, in the Red Canyon Saloon, one of Kane's men, a loudmouth named Razor Jim with a scar across his cheek and too much rot gut in his belly, decided the old man needed some entertainment. "Hey there, Grandpa," Razor Jim called out, his companion snickering. "You lost? Old folks' home is 2 territories over." The old man didn't respond, just stared into his whiskey like it held answers to questions nobody else could hear. Razor Jim pushed away from the bar, boots heavy on the wooden floor. He grabbed the whiskey bottle from the bartender and strolled over to the old man's table. "I'm talking to you, fossil." Still nothing. The old man's hands rested on the table, gnarled and scarred, but steady now. Completely steady. "Maybe he's deaf," one of the other gang members suggested. Razor Jim grinned. Then he appended the whiskey bottle over the old man's head. Brown liquid poured over gray hair, soaked into his worn coat, dripped onto the floor. The saloon went silent. Even a piano player stopped mid-note. The old man sat perfectly still. Whiskey dripped from his beard. His eyes never moved from the table. "There," Razor Jim laughed. "Now you baptized proper. Welcome to Copper Ridge, old man." He turned back toward the bar, his friends roaring with laughter. Nobody noticed the old man's fingers curl slowly into fists. Nobody saw the muscle twitch in his jaw. Nobody recognized the warning signs of a storm about to break. Nobody except maybe the bartender, who was old enough to remember stories from 20 years back. Stories about a man who rode alone, a man who never missed, a man they called the Silent Rider because he never spoke before he killed you, and the dead don't need explanations. But that was just a story. That man was probably dead. Had to be, didn't he? Before you find out what happens when you humiliate a legend, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Subscribe if you love Western justice served cold. Now let's get back to Copper Ridge. The old man stood slowly, joints creaking like old leather. He walked out of the saloon without a word, whiskey still dripping from his clothes. Razor Jim and his friends laughed harder. Just another broken old fool who knew his place. That night, in his room above the boarding house, the old man sat on the edge of his bed and pulled a photograph from his coat pocket. The edges were worn soft from years of handling. A woman and a young boy, maybe 8 years old, standing in front of a ranch house. The woman had kind eyes. The boy had his father's jaw. Both were 16 years dead. The old man, his name was Nathaniel Cross, though he'd buried that name along with his family, traced the photograph with one finger. His throat tightened. Even after all these years, even after everything, it had been a railroad dispute. The big companies pushing west, crushing anyone in their path. Nathaniel had owned a small ranch, nothing special, but it sat on land they wanted. When he refused to sell, they sent enforcers. Not lawmen, enforcers. Men who made problems disappear. They'd come at night, set fire to the house while his wife and son slept. Nathaniel had been in town, selling horses. By the time he rode home, There was nothing left but ashes and the smell of burned flesh that he'd never been able to scrub from his memory. He'd found 6 names. The 6 men who'd ridden out that night. Spent 3 years hunting them across territories and states, tracking them through hell and high water. One by one, they died. Quick deaths for some, slower deaths for others, depending on how much they'd enjoyed their work that night. 5 are dead now. 5 graves in 5 different territories. The 6th man was here in Copper Ridge. Marcus Sutton, who'd been a young gun back then, barely 20, but eager to prove himself. Marcus had held the torch. Marcus had thrown it through the bedroom window. And Marcus now rode with Victor Kane's gang, thinking himself safe behind walls of guns and fear. Nathaniel put the photograph away, lay back on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he'd finish what he started 16 years ago. Tomorrow, the debt would be paid. He hadn't cried in decades. Didn't cry now. Just lay there feeling the weight of 68 years and 43 kills pressing down on him like stones on a grave. The next morning, Mrs. Harrison brought him coffee and cornbread, insisting he needed to eat. She was maybe 50, weathered by desert sun and widowhood, but her eyes were still sharp. "Those men yesterday," she said quietly. "Kane's men. You shouldn't provoke them." "Didn't say a word to them," Nathaniel replied. His voice was rough from disuse, like rust scraping metal. "Existing provokes them." She set the plate down. "They own this town. Nobody stands against them. Not anymore. Maybe somebody should." She studied him for a long moment. "You're not just passing through, are you?" "No, ma'am." "What do they do to you?" Nathaniel looked at her. Really looked. Saw the same pain he carried reflected back. "What do they do to you?" Her jaw tightened. "My husband. 2 years back. He tried to organize the other ranchers, push back against Kane's protection taxes. They hung him from our own barn." Her voice didn't waver. "I found him at dawn. Been too afraid to do anything since." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "Fear's a choice. So's courage. Easy to say. Harder to live." "Yes, ma'am. It is." That afternoon, Nathaniel walked down Copper Ridge's main street. The sun beat down merciless and white. His boots kicked up dust with each step. A few townspeople saw him coming and quickly crossed to the other side of the street. Fear had taught them to make themselves invisible. Near the general store, 3 of Kane's men were shaking down the owner, a Chinese immigrant named Chun who'd been trying to make an honest living selling dry goods. One of the gang members, a massive brute they called Ox, had Chun by the collar, lifting him half off his feet. "Protection money, Chong," Ox growled. "You're 2 weeks late." "I paid last week," Chun protested. "You know I paid." "Then, that was last week's payment. This is this week's." Chen's wife appeared in the doorway, clutching their young daughter. Terror on both their faces. Nathaniel stopped walking, stood in the middle of the street, watched. Ox shook Chun like a rag doll. "You got till sundown, or we burn you out." "That won't be necessary," Nathaniel said. Ox dropped Chun and turned, squinted at the old man. "The hell do you say?" "Said it won't be necessary. Man's paid his due." The other 2 gang members spread out slightly, hands drifting toward their guns. Ox grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "This the old drunk from yesterday?" "Razor Jim said you were pathetic. Guess he was right." "Let the man be," Nathaniel said quietly. "Right on." Ox laughed. A deep, rumbling sound. "You giving me orders, Grandpa?" "Giving you a chance." "A chance?" Ox took a step forward. "Old man, I've killed tougher men than you before breakfast." "No," Nathaniel said. "You haven't." Something in his tone made Ox pause, made the other 2 gang members tense. Up and down the street, townspeople had stopped moving, watching with held breath. An old-timer sitting outside the saloon suddenly stood up, eyes wide. He stared at Nathaniel, at the way he stood, the way his hand hung loose near his gun but ready, so ready, at the absolute calm in his face. "Jesus Christ," the old-timer whispered. "It's him." "Who?" someone asked. "The Silent Rider. It's the goddamn Silent Rider." The name rippled through the street like a gunshot. The Silent Rider. The legend from 20 years back. The man who'd killed 18 rustlers in a single night in Montana. Who'd faced down 7 Mexican bandits in New Mexico and walked away while they bled out in the dust. Who'd been hired by territorial governors and railroad barons and then turned on them when he learned what they really were. The man who'd vanished 16 years ago after his family died. Ox heard the whispers, saw the fear spreading. But he was young and strong and had never lost a fight. He reached for his gun. Nathaniel's hand moved. Not fast, he was too old for fast, but precise. Perfectly, lethally precise. His revolver cleared leather, rose, fired. One shot. Ox's gun had barely cleared his holster when the bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He crashed into a horse trough, water splashing, clutching his bleeding arm. The other two gang members froze, hands half raised. Nathaniel's gun was already aimed at them. Steady as stone. Ride, Nathaniel said. Tell Kane that Nathaniel Cross is in Copper Ridge. Tell him I want Marcus Sutton. Tell him if he doesn't hand Marcus over by dawn tomorrow, I'll come take him. And anyone who stands between us will die. The two men grabbed Ox, hauled him onto a horse, and rode hard toward Kane's compound at the edge of town. Nathaniel holstered his gun. Looked at Shun. You all right? Shun nodded, speechless. Nathaniel walked back toward the boarding house. Behind him, the street erupted in whispers and speculation and fear. They'd poked the bear, woken the sleeping legend. And now Victor Kane would have to respond. Because when a man like Nathaniel Cross issues a challenge, there's only one way it ends. In blood. At the Kane compound, a sprawling ranch house fortified with armed men. Marcus Sutton heard the news and felt his stomach drop into his boots. He'd spent 16 years trying to forget that night in New Mexico, trying to convince himself it was just another job, just following orders, nothing personal. But when Ox stumbled and bleeding and the other men described the shooter, Marcus knew with absolute certainty. Nathaniel Cross had found him. After 16 years of running, of hiding behind bigger, meaner men, the debt had come due. Victor Kane sat in his office, smoking a cigar, listening to the report. He was 42, hard as railroad iron, with cold calculation behind his eyes. He'd built his empire through violence and fear, and he didn't scare easy. But the Silent Rider? That name carried weight even Kane couldn't ignore. How many men we got? Kane asked. 24 counting Ox, but he's hurt, his lieutenant said. And this Cross is what? 70 years old. 68, boss. But he's the real deal. Ask anyone who was there. That draw. He's one old man. Kane cut him off. And we're 24. Math's pretty simple. Marcus stood in the corner, pale. Boss, you don't understand. I was there. In Montana. I saw what he did to those rustlers. It wasn't human. He's old, Kane said flatly. And old men die. Simple as that. He stood. We meet him at dawn. Main Street. All of us. We put him down, make an example. Show this town that legends die just as easy as anyone else. He wants me, Marcus said quietly. If we just hand me over. We don't hand over our own, Kane snapped. That's weakness. We show strength. We end this tomorrow. He pointed his cigar at Marcus. And you're going to be right there beside me. If you run, I'll kill you myself. Marcus swallowed hard. Nodded. He was trapped between two killers, and both wanted him dead. That night, Mrs. Harrison came to Nathaniel's room. She'd heard everything. The whole town had. You challenged Kane, she said. 24 armed men. 23. Ox is out. That's not funny. Wasn't trying to be funny. She sat down in the room's single chair. Why? Why throw your life away? Marcus Sutton, whatever he did to you, is he worth dying for? Nathaniel was quiet for a long time. Finally, he killed my family. My wife. My 8-year-old son. Burned them alive while they slept. Mrs. Harrison's hand went to her mouth. I've spent 16 years settling that debt, Nathaniel continued. Found 5 of the 6 men responsible. Marcus is the last. Tomorrow, I finish it. Then maybe... He trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe I can stop seeing their faces every time I close my eyes. And if Kane kills you, then I'll die knowing I tried. That's more than most men get. He looked at her. Keep folks inside tomorrow. At dawn. Whatever happens, keep them safe. She nodded, tears in her eyes. What you're doing, it's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the first free breath this town's taken in 5 years. Dawn came cold and clear. The sun hadn't crested the mountains yet, but light was bleeding into the eastern sky, turning it the color of old blood. Nathaniel Cross walked down Main Street alone. His joints protested every step. His back ached. He felt every one of his 68 years. But his gun hand was steady. His eyes were clear, and his purpose had never wavered. At the far end of the street, Victor Kane's men assembled. 23 armed outlaws, rifles and revolvers, spread across the width of the street. They looked like an army. They felt invincible. Kane stood in the center, Marcus Sutton to his left. Marcus looked like he might vomit. His gun hand trembled. The town watched from windows, from doorways, from cracks in shuttered buildings, holding their breath, waiting to see if legends were real or just stories old men told. Nathaniel stopped 50 yards from Kane's line. The two groups faced each other in the empty street. Wind kicked up dust devils. A dog barked somewhere and went quiet. Nathaniel Cross, Kane called out. You're outnumbered. Outgunned. Walk away now, and I'll let you live. You've got something I want, Nathaniel replied. His voice carried in the morning stillness. Marcus? He's one of mine. You can't have him. Then you'll all die with him. Kane laughed. 23 against 1. You might be a legend, old man, but you ain't immortal. No, Nathaniel agreed. But I'm meaner than death itself, and I've got nothing left to lose. He positioned himself perfectly, the rising sun behind him, shining into their eyes. An old cavalry trick. Small advantages add up when the odds are bad. Last chance, Kane said. Nathaniel's answer was to draw. His hand moved. The Colt appeared, and the dawn exploded into violence. 7 seconds. That's how long the first exchange lasted. 7 seconds of thunder and smoke and lead. Nathaniel fired as he moved, diving left behind a water trough. His first shot took the man on Kane's right through the throat. His second and third shots hit two men who'd been too eager, too exposed. Bang, bang, bang. Kane's men opened fire. The street became hell. Bullets chewed apart the water trough, splintered wooden posts, shattered windows. But Nathaniel was already moving, rolling behind a wagon. Bang, bang. Two more men fell. One clutching his chest, the other shot through the eye. Spread out. Kane screamed. Flank him. But flanking a man who'd spent 40 years fighting for his life wasn't easy. Nathaniel knew terrain, knew angles, knew how to make every shot count. He came up from behind the wagon. Bang. A man on the saloon steps dropped. Bang. Another trying to reach the alley fell backwards. His shoulder screamed where an old wound from years ago had never healed right. His knee buckled as he rolled again. But he kept moving, kept firing, kept killing. Bang, bang, bang. 3 more outlaws down. The street was filling with gun smoke, thick as fog. Screams and curses cut through the thunder of gunfire. 10 seconds in, 11 men down, 12 still standing. Nathaniel's gun clicked empty. He rolled behind the general store's porch, hands moving automatically. Eject the spent shells, reload, 6 fresh rounds slotted home. 3 seconds total. A bullet grazed his left arm. Hot pain. Blood. He ignored it. He burst from cover, running despite the agony in his knees, firing as he moved. Bang, bang, bang. Each shot precise. Each shot finding flesh. 15 men down now. 8 remaining. Kane's men were panicking. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The old man should be dead. Should be Swiss cheese. But he moved like smoke, shot like divine judgment, and their friends were piling up in the street. Kill him. Kane roared. God damn it, kill him. 5 men charged together, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. Nathaniel dropped to one knee. Aimed. Fired in a rhythm older than memory. Bang. First man down. Bang. Second man dropped. Bang. Third man clutched his gut and fell. Bang. Fourth man's head snapped back. Bang. The fifth man got within 10 feet before Nathaniel's bullet went through his heart. 3 left. Kane and 2 of his best. Nathaniel stood slowly. His left arm hung useless, bleeding heavily. His breath came in gasps. Sweat and blood mixed on his face. But his right hand was steady. Still steady. Kane stared at the carnage. 20 men. 20 men dead or dying in the street. Blood pooling in the dust. Smoke hanging thick. And the old man still standing. Jesus Christ. One of Kane's remaining men whispered. He's the devil himself. Cain's hand moved toward his gun. Nathaniel was faster. Bang! Cain's gun flew from his hand, his fingers shattered. He screamed, clutching his ruined hand. The last two men threw down their weapons, raised their hands. "We're done. We're done." Nathaniel let them run, kept his gun trained on Cain and Marcus, who stood frozen, pale as death itself. "You wanted a legend," Nathaniel said quietly. "Now you know what that means." He walked forward through the smoke and bodies. Each step hurt. His vision swam, blood loss making him dizzy. But he kept moving until he stood in front of Marcus Sutton. Marcus was crying, shaking, staring at the bodies of men he'd known, eaten with, ridden with. "You remember New Mexico?" Nathaniel asked. 16 years ago. A ranch, a woman and a boy. Marcus nodded, tears streaming. "I remember. God help me, I remember. You held the torch. I didn't want to. Cain, the railroad boss, he said we had to make an example. I was 20. I was stupid. I didn't, but you did." Nathaniel cut him off. "You threw it through the window. You killed my family. I'm sorry." Marcus sobbed. "I'm sorry. I've thought about it every day. Every goddamn day. I know sorry doesn't fix it. I know I deserve to die. Just, please make it quick." Nathaniel raised his gun, aimed at Marcus's head. His finger tightened on the trigger, and stopped. He saw his son's face. 8 years old, laughing, before the fire, before the pain, before revenge became Nathaniel's only purpose. What would the boy think of his father now? Standing in a street full of bodies, about to kill a sobbing, broken man? Would he be proud or horrified? Nathaniel lowered the gun slowly. "You're going to live," he said quietly, "but not because I'm merciful. Because I want you to carry this weight. Want you to remember these bodies. Want you to spend every day knowing you should be dead but aren't. And you're going to leave this territory. Going to spend whatever time you have left trying to balance the scales. Help people. Protect people. Be what you should have been 16 years ago. You understand?" Marcus nodded frantically. "Yes. Yes, I swear. I swear on my life." "Your life doesn't mean much to me," Nathaniel said. "But maybe you can make it mean something to someone else." He turned to Cain, who clutched his shattered hand, face twisted in pain and rage. "You're done in Copper Ridge," Nathaniel said. "You and whatever's left of your men. Ride out. Never come back. If I hear you've hurt anyone else, I'll find you. And next time, I won't leave you breathing." Cain spit blood. "You're a dead man walking cross. Even if you survive today, someone will come for you." "They've been coming for me for 40 years, Nathaniel replied. "Still here." He walked away, leaving Cain and Marcus in the street surrounded by the dead. Each step was agony. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. Blood soaked his left side, but he walked, made it to the boarding house. Mrs. Harrison was there, had watched everything from the window. She caught him as he stumbled. "You need a doctor," she said. "I'll be all right. 20 men. You killed 20 men. 21. One bled out while we were talking." She helped him to a chair, started tending his wounds with hands that shook. "Why did you spare Marcus?" "Because my wife would have wanted me to. Because my son deserved better than a father who lived only for revenge." He winced as she cleaned the bullet graze. "Because 16 years is long enough to carry hate." Over the next week, Copper Ridge transformed. Cain and his remaining men rode out that same day, never to return. The townspeople emerged from hiding, blinking in the sunlight like prisoners freed from dark cells. They cleaned the blood from the street, buried the dead, began the slow process of remembering how to live without fear. Mrs. Harrison's husband was avenged, though she took no joy in it. Just quiet relief that her grandchildren might grow up in a town where justice meant something again. Nathaniel's wounds healed slowly. He was old, and his body didn't recover like it once did. But he recovered enough. On the 8th day, he saddled his black horse, tied his few possessions behind the saddle, stood in front of the boarding house in the early morning light. Mrs. Harrison came out, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're leaving. Time to go. Stay. This town owes you everything. Stay and let us take care of you." Nathaniel shook his head. "Debt's paid. I don't belong here. Where will you go?" "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can stop being the silent rider and just be Nathaniel Cross again. If that's even possible." She hugged him, He stiffened. It had been 16 years since anyone had shown him tenderness, then slowly relaxed. Let himself be hugged. "Thank you," she whispered. "For my husband. For this town. For everything." He nodded, couldn't speak past the tightness in his throat, climbed onto his horse, and rode out of Copper Ridge as the sun rose over the mountains. The story of what happened that dawn spread across the territories like wildfire. The silent rider had returned. 21 men dead in 7 minutes. A legend proven real. Some versions said he'd killed 30 men. Some said 50. Some said he'd taken a dozen bullets and kept fighting. But the people of Copper Ridge knew the truth. They'd seen it. One old man, 68 years old, against an army. And the old man had won. They told the story to their children, who told it to their children, who told it to theirs. The legend of Nathaniel Cross became myth, became ghost story, became the kind of tale men told around campfires to remind themselves that justice, however delayed, eventually comes. Some say he rode north into Montana and died peacefully in his sleep. Some swear he's still out there, riding from town to town, helping people who can't help themselves. Others claim they've seen an old man on a black horse at sunset, watching over the territories, making sure men like Victor Kane never rise again. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he's alive. Maybe he's somewhere between, like all legends. Never quite real, never quite gone. But in Copper Ridge, on quiet mornings when the sun rises over the mountains, old-timers still look down Main Street and remember. Remember the smoke and thunder. Remember 21 bodies in the dust. Remember the day a legend walked their streets and gave them back their freedom. And sometimes, in that perfect light of dawn, they swear they can see him. An old man on a black horse, riding toward the horizon, finally at peace. So here's my question for you. If you were Nathaniel Cross, standing over Marcus Sutton with a gun in your hand and 16 years of grief in your heart, would you have pulled the trigger, or would you have chosen mercy? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know if revenge or redemption wins in your book. If this story hit you in the chest, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. I tell stories about justice, revenge, and the price we pay for both every single week. Share this with someone who loves Westerns where the old ways still mean something. Thanks for riding with me today, wherever you're watching from. Remember, legends never die. They just wait for the right moment to remind us what real justice looks like.